Good morning. Welcome to Mending Threads, your safe place and your stronghold for whole body wellness. We're going to talk today about resilience building and how we draw upon our ancestors and those that have gone before us. We have a topic today looking at the legacy of Marcus Garvey. And we're going to look at the learning experiences that bring on and how to use for success building and resilience. So we have with us Reverend, I call him Reverend Doc Walker, because he's an esteemed person in the community and leader with history as well as cultural um, development. So I would like to welcome with us this morning Reverend Aswad Walker, Associate Pastor of the Shrine, as well as historian with both instruction at Texas Southern and University of Houston. So welcome. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Doctor?
Just great, just great. And I see we have a topic that's going to be so meaningful. And I'm giving you the floor this morning. I have some basic questions because I received um, a note from some two or three people that said we really are craving history because we're not getting it in our schools and we
Mm-hmm.
no longer get enough newspaper. It's not on TV and we don't know what to read. And so to have somebody to come and speak about that. So I shared with them that we're going to have um, a show that will bring on and they will be able to sign on as a participant with the show in order to learn about the history and how to apply it in their daily practice. So I'm just so excited about it. So today I'm going to ask you if you could first some we may have some new viewers and I'm really wanting to ask you a question. If you could just share a little bit about how you got into the whole field of history and looking at African American history. If you could just share that a little bit.
Well, I always, you know, when I was in college, part of student movements, specifically the movement to free Nelson Mandela and to get institutions, specifically the one that I was attending, the University of Texas, to divest from apartheid South Africa. And so uh, blackness, African history, African American history was always critically important to me, but also just as important was my faith. And it turned out I had one group of friends that were all into the blackness and wanted nothing to do with religion. I had another group of friends that were all into religion and wanted nothing to do with the blackness, but I felt the two went together. It just made sense to me. And so that is what really, really fueled my desire to study more and more and more. And so after I got the undergraduate degree, I went and got a Master of Divinity from Candler School of Theology at Emory University. And my focus there was on the psychology of religion, the cultural components of religion. And I did my honors thesis on comparing Marcus Mosiah Garvey with Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., who is known by some to be the father of Black liberation theology. And so it only makes sense. I mean, I'm just so glad that we are focusing today on Garvey because if the topic is how what we believe then dictates how we act and dictates the level of resilience that we have, then Garvey is one of the greatest examples of that.
Yes. So I did remember something about Marcus Garvey is the how he and if you could share us how he got started in his movement because he was really a descent. Where was he? He was a descendant from.
From the Maroons,
That's right. That's right. And
from the Maroon,
so if you could just share a little bit about how he got started with his movement or with his life experience, which became a movement.
yeah, well, I mean, you can really go back to his childhood, but I know we don't have all time for that. But
Yes.
when he was in school, he was the best student. He was the best athlete. He was all these things. But as he got older in his like middle school years, in St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica, he noticed that the white parents were not allowing their children to play with the black children anymore, and he noticed this separation in terms of uh, what folk were able to do in society. And so, in his mind, he's thinking, why are these folk getting all these opportunities and the doors are slamming in the faces of black people when I was the best at this, that, and the other? And so, from an early period, he was rejecting this notion that black people were less than, that black people were inferior, but that just fueled his fire, and he was very self-driven, to go out and learn about the history of African people. And as he grew older and older and older, he began to travel the world. Went to Central to South America, went to Europe, studied with the scholar Duse Muhammad Ali. That's where he learned that it was Africans who built the pyramids. It was the African Hannibal that was one of the greatest generals in the known world. It was Africa that birthed and gave the world religion, art, science, civilization. But it was this notion to fight against what he saw, because everywhere he went, he could not believe the tales that the sailors who came into St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica, told him that black people all over the world were suffering this second class citizenship like they were in Jamaica. He just literally could not believe it because he did not feel as if our people were inferior. But so he went and he saw this. And as he says himself, um, there's this one point when he could hear the voices of his ancestors. The way he put it, he could hear them calling from the bones that rested at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, asking him the question, where is the black man and woman's government? Where are our men and women of great affairs? And when he looked around and didn't see it, he said that is when his calling to be a race man, to make these things so, fell upon him. Inspired by um, Booker T. Washington's self help ethic, Garvey wanted to build a Tuskegee Institute in Jamaica, and traveled to the United States to meet with Booker T. Washington. But Washington transition passed away before he could meet. But that was the whole idea, the germination, that we need to build institutions for ourselves, not beg anyone else to do for us what God has given us the power and the ability to do for ourselves.
So that message, it was a message that he said something about the greatest people. Let's see, wait a minute. That we must teach our children that they have greatest people who have gone before them, which will bring, if you recognize the greatest people have gone before you, then you will have the greatest people in front of you, which would mean your descendants.
Well, he
If
was
we say that again.
well he was definitely in tune with the ancestors, so to speak, and in tune with our history. And in fact, he believed that if we did not know our history, um, um, we didn't know who we were and the levels of the heights that we could climb. There's one quote I'm going to read from one of my all-time favorite books, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. He says this: how dare anyone tell us that Africa cannot be redeemed when we have 400 million men and women with warm blood coursing through their veins? The power that holds Africa is not divine. The power that holds Africa is human. And it is recognized that whatsoever man has done, man can do. And so you got to remember, Garvey was on the scene a short 60 years after the enslavement of black people ended. And so he's fighting against a mindset that has been set into Europeans and black people, that we are subservient, that we are less than, that we have no history, heritage, culture. And then there's one group that propose the idea that that because we are less than, because we are oppressed and brutalized, that we have a special relationship with God. But Garvey rejected all that madness. And he said it many different ways. He said, let me find the quote. Oh, he says this: some of us flatter ourselves to believe that God is with us, and God is a being who is taking care of us in this serfdom and peonage and slavery that we are enduring. And then he goes on to say, God is vexed with you because you are subordinating to the powers that he gave you. In other words, what Garvey believed was all human beings were created equal, endowed with intelligence and creativity and a fire to be self-determining. And if we find ourselves in a second class status, don't blame God, don't blame white folk, because white folk are going to do what white folk are going to do. Recognize your power, stand up, and create the world that you want to create. He said another quote I find powerful. I think it really sums up his theology. He said, God and nature first made us what we are, and then out of our own created genius, we make ourselves what we want to be. Follow always that great law. Let the sky and God be our limit and eternity our measurement. He believed we were all created and endowed with powers and abilities, and shame on us if we allow someone else to convince us that we are less than what God created us to be. And shame on us for accepting that and acting as if it is so. And so he was a real proponent for recognizing and breaking out of what someone who was inspired by him, Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., Jeramogi Bebe Ajiman is his African name, the father of Black liberation theology, what he called niggerization. This process that takes a human being and convinces them that they are less than, that they are
Yeah,
supposed to work for the benefit of someone else and their own not their own benefit. Garvey, he was a powerful brother, and I can go on, especially about theology, because theology, a simple way of putting that is theology is God talk, but theology is really what you believe about God, what you believe about humanity, what you believe about salvation, and the role of religion, and the way you believe about those things. Your theology then dictates what you do, because a human being cannot act outside of their operating system, outside of what they believe. And so,
mhm,
whether you believe it consciously or subconsciously, that then creates the matrix out of which you live your life. So,
that's right.
if your beliefs are small, if you believe that you are less than, if you believe that you are unworthy, if you believe you can't do it, then literally you can't do it. What's that saying by Henry Ford? Whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because your belief system then creates the playing field that you give yourself. For Garvey had a liberating and expansive and always growing theology, view of life, view of God, view of himself. God is all powerful, and we are created out of the image and substance of God. The way he looked at God, he didn't look at God as some big man, white, black, or the other in the sky. He referred to God more from the ancient African context. He called God cosmic energy and creative intelligence that we as human beings have access to all the time. So he saw us with all power, this incredible amount of power and ability. And he shook his head when he looked at our people who did not believe that. And that's why he continued to say, Africa for the Africans, up ye mighty race, accomplish what you will. Because if you believe it, I know it sounds corny, but if you
So
believe it,
it's
you can achieve it. But you
yes,
got to
that's
believe it
right.
first, because if you don't believe it, ain't no way you're going to achieve it. You got
That's
to
right.
believe
It's there like a roadmap. And he was talking about, I like that, about the learning experiences. There was this magazine, what was it, the Watchman magazine? And
it.
I did not know that he was really the leader of that. And I used to read that, and I don't hear about it anymore. And
And
where he actually put together all those experiences, and he calls success was not only not giving up, but all of the information that you needed to know about who you were, and as it relates to politics and the decisions that you make now. You can't make informed decisions, so he's unless you know all these things. And so So I was just like bowled over, but I don't know what happened to the magazine. I don't hear about it or see it anymore. We used to get it.
Well, even more impactful than the magazine was his newspaper, the Negro World, which
Yes,
spread his message all across the planet. He had UNIA, that was his organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. He had organizations on every continent except what, Antarctica, I think, um, and could boast 6 million members back in the 1920s, back before social media and cell phones and laptops and all that. So it is a miracle of the Almighty that he was able to have so many souls all across the planet to come together. But one of the reasons why he was able to do that is because he rejected this notion of, how do I put this? I'll say it a different way. He recognized that we have to be able to accept our own authority, stop looking at other people to give us permission to do what we need to do for ourselves. In other words, like the person that has their knee pressed upon your neck does not then have the right to determine how you protest that knee or the actions that you take to remove that knee so that you can breathe again. We've got to recognize our own power, our own divinity, our own authority. And that's why, wherever he was and whenever he was speaking, one of his most often quoted um, scriptures was Psalm 68:31. Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto thee. He viewed that as a reminder to black folk, to the Pan African world, that the power of Almighty God is with us when we recognize who and whose we are. That's why I named the book Princes Shall Come Out of Egypt, because he's known as a race man and a race leader, but people don't give him his props as a theologian. Um,
yes,
the way he believed about God, the way he believed about humanity, then dictated to him that he could not accept second class citizenship, second class status. And many of the people that he inspired, like the whole African liberation movement of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, each one of those countries that kicked the colonizers out of their nations say they were inspired by Garvey, reading the Negro World, his quotes, his poems, all those things. Um, Reverend Albert B. Cleage Jr., the father of Black liberation theology, he was inspired um, by Garvey. There would be no Malcolm X had there not been a Marcus Garvey, because Malcolm X's parents were members of the Garveyite movement. There would be no Honorable Elijah Muhammad without Marcus Garvey, because he had been a member of that movement. There would be no Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple, because the ground that Garvey and the UNIA, uh, the field that they created, then sprouted up all these different buds of people willing and ready to accept their greatness and reject the notion that black people are second class citizens.
and can you talk about how his beliefs then transcended into his behaviors?
Oh,
The
definitely.
behaviors are for business and things like that. Because I'm when you really study some of it, you can't figure out how he traveled, um,
Right.
how he made it around. And I'm going like, how did he do this at that
Right.
time?
How did he travel the world? I mean, he has a really incredible story. But okay, so in terms of his beliefs, what did he believe about sin? So, you know, back in the day, and maybe some people still believe sin is playing cards or wearing the wrong type of clothes. They really reduced sin to this almost idiotic um, uh, personal morality, but then just totally ignore uh, these actions that people take that put millions of lives at risk. But for Garvey, sin was fear, or at least giving into fear, allowing fear to drive the bus. For him, sin was being a race traitor. Sin, for him, that was sin, not standing up for your race. That's one of the reasons why he had such a clash with W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP. Were really colorism and all kinds of other things played into it because Du Bois and others went in hard on Garvey, trying to discredit him. Some of them even worked with the U.S. government to undermine his position and his movement. Um, but he looked at the idea of fighting for integration as racial suicide because from his perspective, if you are knocking on someone else's door and your whole energy is about being able to get into the institutions that they build, well, they can make a decision one day to let you in, and they can make a decision tomorrow to kick your behind out. And so for Garvey, we've got to build our own. It's again inspired by Booker T. Washington, who had this same debate with Du Bois, where Du Bois is focusing on uh, making sure we get a liberal arts education, making sure we have the right to vote. Hell, we need all of it, but Du Bois really looked down upon Booker T. Washington's self-help ethic, and for reasons that are a whole class unto themselves. But you got to remember when the NAACP, the whole Niagara movement, that where the NAACP was formed, it's called the Niagara movement because these blacks and quote unquote well-meaning white people who wanted to put the NAACP together, they wanted to meet in Buffalo, New York, but there were no hotels that would allow black people in the door, so they had to go to Canada to have the meeting. That's why they called it the Niagara movement. But Booker T. Washington, hell, he had a whole campus of institutions and buildings that he built for himself. So he didn't have to ask anybody's permission to have a meeting wherever the hell he wanted to have a meeting. And that was Garvey's approach to the thing. We've got to build the thing ourselves. And if you're not teaching black people to be self-determining, from his perspective, that was sinful. That was being a race traitor. Sin also was worshiping white images of the divine that don't reflect your beauty and how you look. Also, ignorance and underdevelopment, not always working, studying, trying to improve and become your best, your highest self. But he also saw sin both as individual and corporate, and I think that's important. And these beliefs about sin played into his actions as well as his beliefs about salvation. He focused more on earthly salvation. He believed that your road to heaven will take care of itself if you're doing right down here. But if you ignore in the scripture Nehemiah, you see the trouble we are in. Come, let us rebuild. If you see the trouble we are in and do nothing to rebuild, and all you're focused on is where you're going to be after you die, then hell, how you getting into heaven if you don't do anything for the uplift of your people? So salvation for him was earthly salvation, working for the redemption of Africa and African people, building pride, power, institutional power. That's where quote unquote salvation lied. But also a level of salvation or personal salvation was this notion of man, woman, know thyself. Learn who you are. Have some pride in your history, your heritage, your culture. And it's interesting because man, woman, know thyself, it is said were the words that were over the doors of the African mystery temples. That's one of the most foundational religious teachings that stretches from religion to religion, tracing itself back to Ma'at out of ancient Kemet. He looked at Jesus as the standard bearer. He called Jesus the greatest radical that ever lived, the highest ideal of humanity, the model by which we should live our lives if we want to be free. And so all these things then drove his actions to create institutions that promoted man, woman, know thyself, institutions that we had control. And that's why he built doll factory that produced black dolls. When you see
Yes.
those pictures from the 1920 and 1924 UNIA parades through Harlem, you see the Black Star nurses, you see the African Legion, and they're all decked out and in their finery and in their uniforms because black folk were making those uniforms for themselves. The Black Star Line, he purchased two ships because he was trying to create and to facilitate international trade between black people all over the world so that we could have our own economy within this global economy that was keeping us out of their economy. So the way he believed then dictated actions to create what he created. Always fighting for the empowerment of black people. And it's crazy because many of the people that he lifted up ended up turning on him
Yes.
for the bogus charges that put him in Atlanta's prison, and then they deported him. And most of us think that his story ends there. I think 1926 or 27 when he was deported, but he lived until 1940, and he continued to do his great work in London and Canada. Focus more on the arts. He recognized the power of the arts, the power of poetry, the power of plays
Yes.
to get
Yes.
into the psyche of people and to cut through whatever negative beliefs they had, and to help them awaken to their God given. I can go all day with Marcus Garvey. Pan
Well,
Africanism,
I
Pan
know, and
Africanism.
I'm hoping that we're gonna be able to. Not I'm hoping, I just know that we're gonna be able to do this because this is one of the important threads of taking what you know and not relishing in it in a negative manner, but pulling all of the positiveness out of that to move toward what has to be done. And one of the things that you just shared was that you must begin to, you cannot blame or become only angry at other people. You must begin to look at what you need to do. And it's that entrepreneurial behavior and thinking that must come forth during difficult times or during these difficult situations, that you must see that you got to put something in place through your thinking must be transformed into action, you see, in that, in the same vein. So we have with us, we're going to look at talking about that, and I hope you um we're going to have a period at the end where we all can come together to look at what we're going to have to do. But we have with us this morning Reverend Dr. Corey Wilson of Missionary Baptist Church here in Houston. Um, and I want to say this about Reverend Dr. Corey Wilson. He's entangled and intertwined in his experience with both mental health and being an ordained pastor and studying theology. So we really empowered up this morning, aren't we? So so I wanted to say welcome, Dr. Wilson, to Mending Threads this morning, and I wanted to see how did you decide to connect those two ways of looking at life, or are there two different ways of looking at life with your background in mental health and theology?
Thank you so much. First of all, good morning to everyone.
Good
Dr.
morning.
Walker, it's
Good morning.
awesome to meet you, and I appreciate this opportunity for the Lord bringing us together for quite a time and quite a purpose. So I'm very humbled by this, and that's one of the things I make sure no matter what I do or what I'm allowed to do, I try my best through the guise of the Holy Spirit to just stay
Mm,
humble. So with that
yes,
being said, I'm like I'm boiling in a good way. I'm excited for everything my ears are hearing. It's like, man, it's like brothers and sisters meeting and haven't seen each other for centuries. Didn't even know we knew each other because we've never physically met each other. So it's kind of one of those kind of family reunions right now for me. That's what I'm hearing. Because when I hear this, and this is what I've been feeding on, this is a family reunion. I don't have to know you. We know each other. So with that being
yes,
said, I have a doctorate in psychology. I am an archbishop. I'm an ordained archbishop. I'm the pastor of Christian Faith Missionary Baptist Church at 2616 Calumet, right here in Houston, Texas. I've been here 8 years, August. Moved from California after studies, graduate studies, working in the field of psychology almost 17 years. I moved from Louisiana. I'm kind of backtracking. I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, born and raised. After graduating high school, that's when I went on to college, etc. So, with that being said, let me tell you my inspiration and where it came from. Because honestly, one thing that I'm hearing is a common thread. As you read Dr. King's life, uh, Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., then you talk about Garvey. What happens is, as a child, without anybody teaching you, without anybody coaching you, you have an innate ability to look at what's going on around you. And what happens is, when you don't agree as a child, ain't nobody taught you this. Nobody told you to go out and assess and then say what you agree or don't agree. This is innate. This is what comes from a human being. That's why I hate when we try to put children in a box, because what happens, you stifle their ability to be what God has put them to be naturally. Okay? Naturally. So what happens is, my thought was, when I was growing up, I watched my mother. I had a single parent mom, and my grandfather was the chairman of the deacon board at our church, Marine Missionary Baptist Church, which my great great grandfather started. And I think it was 1876. He was one of the only free black men that came from Kentucky that was able to start a ministry. And he did it without formal education, which he went and got after the fact. But he did it straight from the guise of the Holy Spirit, straight from being called, without any assistance from any institution. Because there's some other things that go with the institution. There's some good, but there's also some bad, which is a different discussion. So for me, coming up, when I would go, one day I was on the track team. This is what really got me. My mom had been teaching me. I had been seeing about what to watch for. They had a sheriff. His name was Harry Lee. He was the sheriff of Jefferson Parish Police Department. And I'll never forget, I think I was about 8 or 9 years of age. He came on TV one night after winning his election. And he said unto all the Jefferson Parish constituents, do not, if you are African American, be caught in certain parts of Jefferson Parish after 9 p.m. at night. Wow. And I'm sitting here and I'm saying, wait a minute, there's not a curfew. And he's specified African American. And then after this, I can hear at school from the teachers, my parents, my aunts and uncles, teaching us, warning us the do's and don'ts, where to go, where not to go. Now I'm a kid. I don't see racism the way adults see racism. When you're a child, you got to be taught racism, man. I don't care what nobody say. Don't no child come here disliking another child. I don't care what race they are. If you want to prove that, let's go to a nursery. When you go to a nursery, when you see a child that hasn't been embedded with no sickness yet, you're going to see them playing with one another. They don't know who's black. They don't know who's white. But my whole point is this. Let me calm down. When I saw this, it bothered me personally. And I said to myself, I went to my mom, I said, well, Mom, why can't we go wherever we want to go? And she started breaking down to me racism. But prior to that, I had my own experiences. We lived in a white neighborhood because my mother's husband had came home from the Vietnam War, and he was able to get a home in a real nice community. So because we were the only blacks in the community, okay, every time the garbage people would pass the next day, we had to make sure our garbage was out on the curb, just like it is today. Well, my brother, because he was 5 years older, and I'm gonna get to my point. My brother, because he was 5 years older than me, he was tasked with taking the trash and putting it on the curb. Well, my mom used to do ceramics, and she always had these big, heavy ceramic ashtrays on the coffee table. She said, you take the trash out, and you take this big ashtray, and if the white man let his dog out on you, you need to bust that Doberman pincher in his head to protect you and your brother. These are the things I'm seeing but not understanding. So with that being said, I got my inspiration from me understanding what I was not going to accept. For me, I don't care what the norms were. I didn't care what we were supposed to wear. I didn't care what we were supposed to do, where we were supposed to go, what we were supposed to eat. I just saw in everything somebody dictating to certain people what they could and could not do. And what blew me away was when you show me a race or a people that don't have these same dictations, then you show me a race of people that do in the same environment. I'm confused.
Yeah.
Okay? That didn't make sense to me as a child. So when a child see this kind of stuff, you can't make no sense out of it. There's no logic to it. So with that being said, it caused me to quietly go on my own quest to find out why these norms were the way they were. So with that, my mother had a master's in education. Okay. And I got to be honest with you. In the beginning of my career or whatnot in education, I didn't respect education the way I should have because my mother, with a master's in education, she was a school teacher. And sadly enough, after school, after we had school and she had work, we had to go and clean office buildings 4 days a week just to make ends meet. I didn't understand it. I'm like, Mom, why are you barking and promoting education to me and my brother when you're broke? I don't get it. You're telling us, get educated, get educated. But we got to go clean offices. I can't do extracurricular activities. I can't play basketball. After homework, we got to get ready at 4:30 to get back in the car to go clean offices to help you make ends meet. I don't have a problem with that. But then you're going to tell me to respect education? Doesn't make sense to me. But that was my young way of thinking. I was missing a lot of dynamics and connecting the dots. With that being said, let me move forward. Coming up under my grandfather, which was the chairman of the deacon board, I grew up in a church where it was always not just an African-American pastor, but the pastor, for the most part, for my upbringing, was always one of my great uncles because it was our heritage. It is things that I learned about our history that we had began to lose as the generations moved forward. So by the time I became aware to be able to understand what was going on, everything that my great-great-grandfather and my great-uncle established was beginning to wean to where we didn't have nothing. We just had a name, a church, and we went from a community to a ghetto, to a hood, to violence. Everything through my day was completely different from what it was from my ancestors. So with all that being said, I had choices to make every day, whether I was going to listen to what my family heritage was about, which was given to me in a very spotty way, or was I going to get myself into the norms of the neighborhood? And because I like sports, I didn't really understand, didn't care for school because it didn't make sense to me. So with that being said, as I grew, my mom, I used to work at this YMCA for a summer youth program. In New Orleans, Louisiana, there's a thing called Manpower. And you can apply at the end of the school year to get a summer job beginning at 14. Well, my first job as a summer worker was a youth counselor at the YMCA, which was the city gym where you send your kids, for the African Americans who's working, they were able to send their kids to a program. That is the beginning of what my inspiration was for giving back and helping. But here's the beauty, and this is what separates a lot of us. And I'm gonna let you ask your next question because I can go on. When we give back, we must not do it primarily for what we're going to get in return. And what I've seen through my career of our people in America, when we do things, sadly enough, because of what we're under economically, it began to fuel and charge the premise of why we're doing what we're doing. And when you got that ugly monster pushing and fueling what you're doing, you're no longer going to be sincere. You're no longer going to be pure about it. And you're going to be doing it for more money, status, and power than the true essence of helping people. When you get the Garvey and people like that, them people didn't care about money and power, not for the reasons we do. They were really serious simply with helping people that he saw that did not see what he saw. Dr. King, all of the ones that did what they did, it wasn't about them. And for me today, that's where I think we are losing it because we are too materialistic, okay, to think about how we're going to help the people. Because when helping the people and helping ourselves are on the same table and nobody's looking, sadly enough, if your soul isn't right, for me, I know, and converted with Christ in you, so you do what you're supposed to do in the dark or in the light, you ain't gonna make the right decision. Then you're gonna do these things that surfacely look like you're helping, but beneath the surface, you're helping yourself. So for me, I don't want to be like that. I really want to help the people, and I've sacrificed within my own life. I'm not even really known for what I know because I don't have time to promote myself. Most of my work is in the people and in the things that God has called me to do. I leave a lot of that to Him if it happens, but if it doesn't, I'm fine, because if I die, I just want to be known for what I was able to give to people from my heart. Everything else, I don't even care about. So with that being said, that's my inspiration from mental health. Now, when I learned about what had happened to Black people in America from a mindset, thank you, Lord, that blew me away, because now when I took psychology, I began to see, oh, and when I first started school, my initial major was anthropology. The problem with anthropology for me, in the initial courses, it was taking me through archaeology. Now, I'm a clean type of guy. I don't like messing my nails up. And a lot of people joke, oh, you ain't got no calluses. You got soft hands. Well, I wear gloves when I do everything. Okay? I ain't messing my little hands up. I don't like the motor oil under my nails look. But anyway, when they took me through archaeology and the study of digging and finds, I'm like, I can't do anthropology because I ain't into archaeology. But I was into the study of man. I wanted to understand my way of looking at life. When I had toys as a child, my mom said, when I would get a toy, I love the toy. I like to play with it. But then 3 hours later, she would come in my room and see my toys completely dismantled and taken completely apart. Why? I wanted to understand, as much as I liked the toy, what made this toy be a toy? What consisted? What was behind what I saw on the outside? So I was able to always go in and dissect to see, how did this become what it is? That inspired me from the brain. When I saw my people suffering, let me say this, and I saw how we treated one another, because I had first cousins and family members to do some nasty things to me as a child. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I never saw my own color as an enemy. I didn't even see them where I needed to compete against them. But sadly enough, that was not the way they saw me. And I was confused by that, and it hurt me so much so I went to search, why are we the way we are? And then talk about blaming. When we get in trouble, the first thing we do is blame. And I didn't understand. So when I learned psychology, I'm like, oh my goodness, it helped me to match and figure out some things that just didn't make sense on the outside for me. So psychology helped me understand the workings of the mind, the difference of the cortex in the amygdala. Why do we work through so many emotions and not much intellect? And how do you marry the two? It also taught me the Caucasians by nature. They think through their cortex, which is the intellectual side of the brain. Black people by nature think through the amygdala, which is what? The emotional side of the brain. So you got one person and people thinking through intellect, which is like a machine. Then you got another set of people by nature thinking through their amygdala, which is their heart, which is their nature. That's why we seem so gullible and stupid. We're not gullible or stupid. We're nice. We're loving people, and we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Caucasians ain't gonna do that. One thing about a Caucasian, you say whatever you want. You got to prove yourself to them. Only Black people, you can come to them, tell them something good, and they completely fall, believe in what you say, because they want to give you the benefit of the doubt. So with all that being said, let me give it back to you, Dr. Wilson. All these things inspired me, and then I got closer to God because I was on the wrong path. Let me say that. I wasn't always on the right path because I was lost. So at 23, in college, God used a man to come and minister to me. Now, don't get me wrong. I was raised in church. And see, this is the misconception when you hear a lot of African Americans say, I was raised in church. I've studied the Bible. I know all the ins and outs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, just because you was raised in the church don't mean the church got in you. And I think we have a very bad misconception. This is where a lot of people have left the church and left Christ, thinking they know what they just left, but they never became a part of what they just left. They have no real understanding of what they just left. That's no different than a car or me walking into a garage and the garage making me a car. For us just to be in church, okay, and the church never getting in you, I'm sorry. I see why you left. And I see why you're still doing the things that you're doing. The church never got in you. You just got exposed to the church. And 1 and 1 don't equal 2. So with that being said, having that, the man of God coming to me, talking to me, reminded me about Christ, being saved, turning from my wicked ways. And at that time in my life, I had all kind of thoughts in my mind, finishing school, doing some nasty things of sin. But with that, I accepted him, I accepted Christ, accepted my calling. So from 23 up until now, I've been on a journey, what Christ has put me on, to bring the gospel, but to expand it, to get a clear understanding on how psychology of man, the tricks that have been played on us, the lies that we were told, but all of my stuff has come strictly from the Bible with the biblical principles. Because what I've learned, even studying other books, everything is from the Bible. I don't care how you hide it, how you cut it. Even talking to my Muslim Islamic brothers, when I heard that their prophet was from the Abraham descendant, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we're brothers. But why are we fighting? Well, we believe this and you believe that. I said, but time out, y'all. Wait. You telling me we all go back to Abraham and you agree to that? I'm like, y'all, wait a minute. Why are we fighting? I just don't understand. What's the problem? It's like you said, and let me say this about Marcus Garvey, I'm going to give it back. Marcus Garvey, one of the things, there's a phrase that came with what he was doing. It's called Black nationalism. Okay? Black nationalism is everything that Dr. Walker was describing about why and what Marcus Garvey was trying to do. Black nationalism is simply this. He's saying, listen, since you have your institution, you have your professors, you have your teachers, you have your way of learning, you have your style of learning. No problem. Give us the things that we need so we can in turn go get the same type of institution. We don't need your institution. We just want the money that goes with getting the institution. Let us bring our own professors. Let us bring our own teachers. Black nationalism is just that for what he was trying to promote. He was just saying, so we don't get caught up in these other race of people stuff. Just give us the money so we can go and establish our own, for which you have not given us the funding to get. So with that being said, I love a lot of things about Brother Marcus Garvey, everything he believed, and a lot of other historians. I don't want to keep being sounding redundant. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, bless you.
So one of the things is that we had asked you to share your experience, and we were looking at success building, but I think we need to come up with looking at how success building truly is resilience through difficult situations and the things that we need to believe. So I thought right now we could help the listener by looking at, through your experiences, through what you studied, both of you, what can we brainstorm or say would be those threads for wellness building, for wellness, success building, resilience. That we have gotten from Marcus Garvey or through our experiences. Maybe we need to highlight some of those things. And I know I can share a few, but I like that about the positive emotions. I know when listening to you, Doc Walker, I hear that one of the things that we need to pay attention to is creating our positive experiences, our positive emotions around the things, not giving up, being consistent and thinking and using our beliefs and kind of like connecting the thoughts to move forward rather than accepting defeat. There was a study where they began to look at people. They did a study, if I remember, where they were punching something, they would get an electric shock, and some people could turn it off, and the second group couldn't, and the third group didn't know what to do or something like that. And what they found out is that the second group, who could not control the electric shock, eventually, since they couldn't turn it off, when they were put in a situation again, they just stopped. They didn't do anything. So one of the things that they came out of this with was, let's look at the group that did. It was a pretty much like a third of the group didn't. They kept trying, and they finally eventually figured out what to do. So how is it that some of the people are able to sustain and overcome certain situations and other people are not? And what they came up with is what we were talking about. If you believe and you know you have information about successful people in your family, in your past, in your history, you can kind of own that, and it gives you a thread of being able to sustain the difficulties that you're encountering at that particular time, and you rethink situations just by that. But if
Yeah,
you don't even have that, you have less opportunity to hold on and begin to think in a different way, and to hold on to your beliefs. So that's one of the things that I know listening to you would be important to make comment on, and maybe we could make comment on two or three others.
yeah. There's a concept um, called learned helplessness, and there's a book by Kenneth Stamp, The Peculiar Institution. Chapter 4 is entitled "To Make Them Stand in Fear," and it talks about the process that was used to take human beings and convince them that they were enslaved, or that they were. I don't like to use the term slave because that
Mhm.
connotes that they were born to be that. But if you can convince someone that that's what they are, and one of those things, one of the steps in the process was learned helplessness, to show that there was absolutely nothing enslaved black people could do to change their condition. Because if you can get people to accept their total helplessness, they will stop trying. But the way Garvey put it, here's another quote. He says, "If you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you have won even before you have started." And so he's talking about the total opposite of learned helplessness. He's talking about self determination. He's talking about grit. He's talking about persistence. That you can see, Reverend Albert B. Cleage, he uses this term, um, the declaration of black inferiority. He argues that whites have declared all black people, East Side, West Side, educated, not all black people, inferior. It was one thing to call black people or declare black people inferior, but it's a whole different level when we accept it. See, it's not what they call you, it's what you answer to, is the way some folk used to put it. But basically, what he's saying is when we accept other people's definition of who we are and what we can do, that's when we are in trouble. And so, in terms of developing that grit and persistence and ability to fight through, one of the critical things is learning about self. Man, woman, know thyself. We got to learn our history, our heritage, and not just the history of Garvey or Ida B. Wells or Malcolm X. All those things are important, or ancient Africa. Start with the history of your family. You got some people in your family whose names aren't in the history books, but who, like the doctor's talking about, his mother did great things and she made a way out of no way. She did what she had to do so that this brother could be who he is today. We got to learn about those heroes and sheroes in our own family. And when we learn about them and the stuff that they went through and the struggles that they overcame, then we can expand that to learn the history of our people. That's where we start to develop the confidence in self. That's one of the reasons why the passing of Chadwick Boseman hurt so much, because he was a symbol of who we are and what we can become. He was that symbol that allowed us to see and to feel some hope in what we can do. And so, the whole movie Black Panther and all that was more than just a movie. It was more than just a fictional character. It was really symbolism of what we can do, what we can be. Wakanda may be a fictional place, but it's really referring to our historical greatness. And if we can reconnect with that, that's where we get confidence in self. Because hell, life is hard. You're gonna have setbacks and losses and failures. You're gonna have all that. But when you have grit and determination and confidence in self, you will keep on pushing. You'll keep on moving, keep on pressing forward.
Okay, and Dr. Wilson, can we get one of the threads from you?
Right. One of the things for me that has helped me tremendously has been really the major aspect of my boost and never giving up. Honestly, when I gave my life to Christ, okay, and I became baptized and went on the right journey of what to do after baptism, which sadly enough is pretty much overlooked and missed even in the church. That's preaching baptism. They're making people think you get baptized and take off, God's grace gonna take care of everything else. It's not like that. And it's sad. But with that being said, once you become born again, the first thing you're gonna realize is Matthew 6:33. You have to start seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And then all these other things will be added. God is going to help you prioritize. Because if you put the wrong thing first, when all of it has importance, you're going to still miss the most important aspect of living on this planet before you die, even being successful in certain things. You can be successful, but then the Bible tells you, be careful. Because it says, what sense is it for a man to gain the whole world, but yet still lose his soul? And sadly enough for me, as I listen to us, we mean well. We're helping people to get up and move and become educated and be a mover and a shaker, rise above what's happening. That's good. But in that, what happens if you die and you ain't ever got your soul right with God? For whatever that might mean, but I know what it means, but whatever that might mean to you. You got to get your soul right with the Lord, the one who came and died on the cross and rose on the third day to help you remove the shackles that you can't visibly see that come through man by the devil. God through his spirit, that's what the comforter is. He's going to become your partner in this hard journey called life, because to do, you got to go against the stream like a salmon. But with the help of the Holy Spirit, when you get hit, he is going to help you with not falling or crumbling or stopping whatever you're trying to get accomplished. And you're going to need that inward and outward help. You can't lack in any of them. To get through this world, to do the things that you have been put here to do, you're going to need the help on the inside and the outside. So for me, the one thing I would say to people, you got to get back to Jesus Christ. You got to get back to your Lord and Savior, because inwardly, he's going to help you fix your soul, and then he's going to help what can happen to your mind and all of the tricks that's been played. So when you get hit, you'll know, let me persevere, let me stand, and you will understand this. In everything you do that's good, it's going to be difficult. Because sadly enough, while you're trying to win, you have an adversary that's trying to destroy everything you're trying to accomplish and establish. So for me, for what I would ask any of us that's trying to come out of our condition, you can do it. There's not a question on if. It's if you decide, not about your condition, on if you're going to get the adequate help. And I know Christ is adequate help, because he's not just going to help you with the soul and the spirit. He's also going to help you with the psychology, the dichotomy, whatever you need, he's going to give it to you. And I promise you, whatever you've been put here to do, you will do it. But then you got to have that self-determination. And that's what I would suggest. Go in versus going out to get your help. That's where I get mine from. Inward, not outward.
Well, don't we have some hot stuff to talk about that we're going to take on for the future? I do want to say we have had a good discussion today, and this is not the end of it. For our listeners, we do have a whole body wellness program. We have a pastor's connection group uh, for this legacy or for this learning. It's a pastor's training in mental health coaching, spiritual coaching, connecting that. And I'll say that Dr. Corey Wilson, along with Doc Walker, will be two of those leaders that will be connecting us to that experience. So please go on our website, call us today at 281-381-2276, or please email us at ips.health1, the number one, at gmail.com, and let us know of your interest and sign up to participate. Let's make it happen, build strength in the community, and connect, renew beliefs, rebuild faith, reconnect families and communities. For remember this, it is not the circumstances that we meet, it is the manner in which we respond that determines health, happiness, and success. And I'll look forward to seeing you signed up, and have a good day, a good week, and make a difference in your community today. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show, Doc Walker and Dr. Wilson. And I'll look forward to seeing you, Doc Walker, next week. And Dr. Wilson will be on Facebook. We'll be working that out so that you'll be able to see him so you can sign up for this training. Okay? So we're going to make that happen and do what we can do and change expectations for whole body wellness. Thank you and have a good day.